Just wanted to point out that before I could watch Outnumbered, it had been tagged as the following content has been identified by the YouTube community as inappropriate or offensive to some audiences. Okay. The next was this content may be inappropriate for some users. And why is it inappropriate? Because it points out the Biden hypocrisy. He had classified documents that go back to the time that he was even a senator. He is a sinister senator. Unless something happens, these guys repent, hellfire awaits them. And I shudder to think of the level of judgment that they have coming upon them by the divine.
Actually, the chairman now of Judiciary, Jim Jordan, addressed that too, and so has Comer, chairman of Oversight, and so did the third most powerful in the House, the whip today, Tom Emmer, who was on with me. The problem is the fact that Senate members, as you started with, are held to a different standard. Mm-hmm. And they know, because they sign a document, according to Representative Emmer, that they can't do what Biden has done. And it's one thing if he just left the Senate like 15 minutes ago, but it's been 15 years, Emily.
15 years.
So why did he have these papers for so long? Now, we know he's, writing a book or has written a book. I mean, maybe he was using these documents at some point, but at no point as a senator or as a vice president could he have declassified those documents. Only a presidents that he took them from could do that. That's problematic.
And it makes it more problematic if he had been using those documents for his book. Keep in mind how many times he's moved as well. As senator, he has a certain home, and then when you are vice president, you live in the Naval Observatory. So for 8 years, he lived somewhere else. He moved again multiple times. So did these documents just get shuffled around from place to place, from holding pile to holding pile?
Yes.
In that snow globe? I love that image that you painted, because I think that's what's being demonstrated and certainly communicated to those of us who have been watching this. I note as well, even in terms of how it's portrayed. Actually, I back up. I should say this. I have been a part of federal criminal investigations where the level of cooperation certainly doesn't matter when places are searched. So the notion that this president keeps sort of falling back on, well, we've been cooperating, or as the New York Times called it, quiet cooperation, it doesn't matter. It doesn't stay the FBI from coming in without warning and SWAT team and searching your house or your home or your place of business at 7 in the morning with guns drawn, which I have seen. Yeah. And I also want to point out how this is being portrayed. So I mentioned how the New York Times called it quiet cooperation. They seem to be saying that, oh, it's because of I almost said the vice president, because of the president's team of lawyers, that they are suggesting to him, keep it quiet from the public, you will quietly cooperate with the DOJ, and that other issue, that's just PR. They went so far as to draw a parallel with President Clinton at the time, the Monica Lewinsky scandal, drawing the same irritation that his team felt and the American public felt, and saying, well, it was just the attorneys. They were telling us to be quiet. We're so sorry. That's how they are drawing this. Keep in mind, at the same time, Senator Kaine, Senator Debbie Dingell, they have been saying, oh, the government classifies everything, you guys. There's nothing to see here. That's the landscape that the American people are receiving this, while the Senator Chair of Intel, Democrat Senator Warner, he has said, I received no briefing, and he is seeking right now to determine the threat assessment level of this breach.
Tell that to people who are in prison for doing the exact same thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, and Senator Dick Durbin, Mark, also saying that this is more than problematic.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I mean, he was obviously sloppy, he was reckless, he was careless with the handling of these documents, and I found it, the word he used when the initial documents were discovered at his think tank. I was surprised Joe Biden had a think tank in the first place,
Biden
right?
Center.
Yeah, at his think tank, that he was surprised. That's a dead giveaway that he had no idea where any of these documents were. And you continue to see them surface in additional places. I don't know how many, maybe 5 or 6 batches have been found so far. Who knows how many more are going to be found? And we still don't know the contents of what's actually in these documents. And, from President Biden's perspective, the whole "I have no regrets," there's no there comments that he's made, it speaks to his arrogance. It speaks to him not being accountable, him not being responsible. And when you are the leader of the free world, you got to own up to your mistakes, right? And obviously there are some legal issues with what he did, but typically when you own up to your mistakes, there's like a psychological benefit, you know, and everyone kind of like, oh, wow, he just owned his mistake. Like,
right.
Maybe I like him a little more. Not sure that would happen in this case, but when you own something, people are responsive and receptive to it.
Yeah.
From the president who promised us that he would be the most transparent and lead the most transparent administration in American history, the truth could only help him.
And the American
Anything
people.
opposite, anything like having your press secretary say on record 2 Thursdays ago, the search is over.
Yeah.
We know that was a lie. And how do we know? Because nobody had said it was over. I thought she couldn't talk about it. How could she talk about it then?
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that, set your egg timer 2 days later, they found the next tranche of documents. I want to go here with you, Cheryl. I mentioned Senator Dick Durbin. He was asked about comparing this to, you know, taking kind of a higher ground compared to what President Trump did. And Dick Durbin said, of course, Biden's lost the higher ground.
Well, of course he has, because now polling is showing that Americans have lost faith and confidence in him as far as how he's handled this entire mess. And playing politics. I mean, let's go back to December 2nd when those documents were found at the Penn Biden Center. I mean, they didn't come forward right away. His lawyers didn't. They waited until after the midterms. So that's a pretty easy analysis there, that there was a lot of politicking going on behind the scenes. And remember, Karine Jean-Pierre, we're finding out now, was not involved in any of that. So she's, I think, been caught a little off guard, and I think it shows as far as communications or lack thereof from the White House. But the other thing that I thought Miranda Devine pointed out very well today in the New York Post was the fact that if you look at the timeline, and CNN has reported that there was Ukraine documents, Iran documents, UK documents, this was 2013 to 2016. That's when Hunter was living in that house. And the laptop has exposed so much of these communications, in particular emails he was sending on behalf of Burisma, you know, the big guy, all of that, that
was on
really,
the board
he sounded pretty smart in those emails.
Let's talk about, just real quickly, what else was going on in the world and some of those document, you know, topics that there were found, top secret markings of the first tranche at the Penn Biden Center. What was going on in Ukraine at the time? Were they struggling with the top of their leadership? Who was going to lead that country? I mean, if you look historically, what was happening, it wasn't that long ago, but there's enough there for us to ask questions. Hey, and if you have a man who wants to run for president again and he doesn't want to take the easy stuff, what happens when it starts to get harder?
What they did day one when these documents were found at the Penn Biden Center tells you everything you need to know. It was a lawyer from Biden who found them. The first call was to the White House. The White House, Biden and some of his top advisors met. They called the National Archives. They did not call the Justice Department. The National Archives called the Justice Department. Wow. They did not call the authorities. So when they talk about cooperation, that needs to be stuck where the sun doesn't shine.
Ooh, all right, we'll stop there. Protesters in Atlanta.
Erupting in downtown Atlanta, police have arrested 6 people, and the